Five Nights at Freddy's. Clawmarks. Chapter 2. Hey kids, I'm Freddy Fazbear, and welcome to my pizzeria. I sure missed having all you boys and girls around after such a long night, but now that you're here, I'm gonna sing a happy song. The animatronic bear laughed. His friends started playing bouncy, upbeat music as the children near the stage cheered. Max smiled. Leaning over to William, he said, I wouldn't mind having one of those someday. Afton was too busy fumbling with a spring lock to pay much attention to what his co-worker told him. What? A robot? He mumbled, trying to carefully free one pinky. No, a kid. I wish I had a kid of my own, Max replied, evidently annoyed. Guess you better get married then, Will replied. Max looked down at the floor, shuffling from one foot to the other. It had been many years since he was married, but his wife was amazing. Martha divined everything that made a wife, well, a wife, and a good one at that. She cared for Max, listening to his problems and being there for him. That only lasted for 3 years before she died. Since then, Max never really considered marrying anyone else. The engineer was startled out of his thoughts by the loud snap at the spring lock. Thankfully, Will had yanked his finger out of the way in time. You gave me a heart attack, Max snarled, elbowing Afton, who only laughed. Soon the loudspeaker came on overhead, silencing the whole pizzeria. It was Henry's. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, today we have a new friend joining the band. Put your hands together for Vicky. Max whispered. You did remember to debug her, right? William nodded. Yes, don't worry. I've even made some improvements. Everyone watched in a mixture of curiosity and terror as Vicky walked up on stage, a few of the other engineers whispering prayers under their breaths. Freddy and the others turned to watch her. Facing the audience, Vicky held up 3 balls in her paws and started to juggle them. I just hope it works, Afton murmured. Because if it doesn't, Max responded, Vicky's decommissioned and you're fired. Thankfully, the animatronic did all her tricks without mishap. Freddy seemed to be the most focused on her, something intriguing glittering in his baby blue eyes, not moving an inch. The employees could breathe a bit easier now. Even the children were no longer scooting back in their seats. Instead, they were all trying to get closer. Max joined them, hoping that in the event of another incident, he could try to protect him. Freddy's eyes clicked, staring at him. Max waved his fingers at the bear, who turned his gaze to Vicky, intently studying her. Max didn't know why. Soon closing time came. All the families filed out one by one, and most of the employees went home. Vicky was taken backstage again, while Max, Henry, and William were left to clean up. Afton was in a particularly good mood, since Vicky seemed to be quite a success, and yet it also seemed like he had something to hide. Larry Gibson, the current night guard, came in as soon as the sun set. Henry shook his head. Hey, Larry, you ready for your second night here? The guard had a worried look on his face. Yes, sir, he said. But I've got a question, Henry replied. Fire away. Larry twirled his fingers. How come the robots move around at night? Max looked up in surprise. William pat Larry on the back. It's so their servos won't lock up, he said. They're never turned off, just put in some kind of sleep mode. It's relatively harmless, nothing to worry about. Larry didn't look sure, but he shrugged. Yeah, the guy on the phone said something about that. Henry slipped on his black jacket and started buttoning it up. He said, Just be sure to lock the place up after your shift, Larry. This place is going downhill as it is without a robbery. Got it, boss, the guard said. William and Max followed Henry outside. Each man parted ways to his own vehicle, driving off into the direction of their homes as Larry was left to keep an eye on things. Larry scanned the monitors that sat in his desk, watching the animatronics closely and carefully. He could have sworn the bunny had moved, but ultimately called himself stupid as he took a swig of soda. Larry switched the camera to Pirate's Cove, noticing with mild alarm that Foxy was poking his head out from between the curtains. The fox's silver eyes pierced the darkness, as did his hook, which was starting to slowly pull one curtain back. Don't you dare, Fox, Larry warned. The footage glitched out, and the next time it showed picture, Foxy was gone. The curtains were now wide open. Loud, fast footsteps echoed down the west hall. In a panic, Larry hit the red button to his left, sending the metal hydraulic door down with incredible force. 4 hard knocks came from outside. Then there was silence. The guard waited a few seconds before opening the door again, making sure nobody else was there. Relatively harmless, my butt, he muttered, switching to the backstage video feed. To his surprise, the new animatronic was standing there, staring up into the lens of the camera. Hey, Vicky, Larry said. Then he looked at the stage monitor and realized that Bonnie and Chica were both gone. Larry hurriedly searched for them both on the feeds, but nothing familiar showed up. Only then did he know something was very, very wrong. The guard whirled around in his chair and screamed when he saw them in his office. Diving between Bonnie's legs, Larry made a break down to East Hallway, through the kitchen and into the main dining area. He nearly tripped over his own 2 feet, struggling to put as much distance from the animatronics as possible. As the guard passed the stage, Freddy Fazbear leapt off and pursued him next. The man had only gone about 5 feet when he slammed into something metallic, sending him sprawling to the tile floor. Rubbing his head, he slowly looked up, then gasped in horror. Towering over him was Vicky, brandishing a serrated pizza cutter in false modesty. Larry scrambled to his feet as Freddy tried to catch him, but Vicky dropped the cutter and sunk her claws into his shoulders, preventing him from going any farther. Larry screamed in cold, pure terror as he felt his stomach being torn in two. Vicky was ripping him open. The disgusting, splattering noise his intestines made as they hit the ground told him there would be no escape. The guard squirmed, trying to make one last attempt, but Freddy lifted him up by the throat. The bear carried him to the spare parts closet. On a bench sat what appeared to Larry as an empty costume, but was unfortunately full of metal endoskeleton. The man was already starting to fade from blood loss and shock. However, the worst was yet to come. Almost instinctively, Larry had some sort of foresight into what kind of horrific deed was about to be done, as his legs were placed inside the suit's jaws. Its sharp teeth pierced through the jeans. He started crying, looking at Freddy helplessly as though he wanted some form of mercy. "Please, please don't," Larry wheezed. But all he saw behind the bear's blue eyes was hatred and anger. Without warning, the animatronic shoved them right into the suit, turning the man's vision from blurry to red as he felt the most excruciating pain no living thing should ever have to endure. The spring lock stabbed through Larry first, puncturing every major artery. Then the robotic pieces crushed his bones as they folded into place. His cries were cut short as one of the parts severed his vocal cords. Freddy just laughed deeply while the man bled out everywhere, soaking the black and white tile floor in a small pool. Then the bear walked away, his booming footsteps becoming ringing memories, as the guard closed his eyes for the last and final time. Freddy went back to the spot where he caught Larry, only to find the guts were gone. Vicky had placed him in a garbage bag and cleaned up the blood. She stood there in the moonlit pizzeria, looking at Freddy, who stared back. He gave her a mysterious little smile and went back to his stage. Max sat up straight in bed, panting. He had another nightmare. That same stupid dream about Vicky and Gerald. "Quit torturing yourself," Max said aloud. "The kid's safe. His mother's never bringing him back." Still feeling shaken, he got up and got himself a glass of milk. The clock read 5:30, but for some reason it felt later than that. After drowsily downing his drink, Max retired, trying to visualize happy things. Still, the nightmare kept returning. No matter how hard he tried, images of a little child being viciously attacked by an animatronic blocked out everything else in his mind. "It isn't real. She's okay now," Max muttered, grabbing the sides of his head. He groaned when he heard the clock chime 6. The engineer left for Freddy's. Henry was already there, looking at the front doors in confusion. "I thought I asked Larry to lock up," he mused. At this point, Will drove up in his purple convertible, and as he got out, Max couldn't help but notice that his clothing was about as purple as his car, from his cap to his shoes. Some red liquid splotched one side of his shirt. "Quite the get-up, don't you think?" Max humored. "Didn't know you liked purple that much." Afton lifted his face up, revealing his sunken-in eyes. Henry gave him a look of concern. "Dang, Mr. Afton, what's wrong? You sick or something?" The purple man only laughed. "Not at all, sir. Just had a long night." Henry led the trio into the pizzeria, shaking his head as he said, "Your night must have been easy compared to Larry's. He even left his keys here on the counter." The manager called for Larry, but there was no answer. Max kept glancing every now and then at the red splotch on William. Finally, he asked, "What's that red stuff, if you don't mind my asking?" Afton just stared into space for a bit, something Henry would usually do. Then he replied, "Accidentally got some paint on me. I was working on something." "Oh." There was a long silence, but Henry broke it. "I tried calling a cell phone," he said, "but he isn't picking up." Will methodically stated, "Dude probably chickened out or something. We've lost a lot of guards that way. No need to get the cops involved again." Henry didn't look convinced, but finally he gave in. "Okay, Will, let's start the animatronics for today. I guess I'll have to put another help wanted ad in the papers." Freddy gazed over his crowd of child fans, singing into the microphone as Bonnie and Chica played alongside beside him. Everybody cheered him on, except for a young boy named Andy. The 6-year-old was crouched under one of the tables, holding his face while tears streamed down. "Come on, Andy, they're not going to hurt you," his father grumbled. The boy whimpered, "No, Dad, they're going to get me." "Oh, for the love of Pete," the man snapped. He picked his son up and walked toward the stage. I don't know what they've been telling you at school, but those robots won't hurt you." Andy gasped, nearly turning white with fear. "No, get me away from them. Put me down," he cried. Max turned to see what the commotion was about, then felt his heart leap out of his chest. "Sir, that really isn't a good idea. Sir," he hollered above the happy shrills of children. The engineer and a few of the daytime guards rushed from different directions to try and stop the father from getting any closer, but it was too late. Andy, in his desperate struggle to get loose, fell from his parents' arms. He yelled as he went falling to the ground, but then he stopped. Everything went silent. The child opened one eye, then the other. Andy was hovering above the floor. He cautiously turned his head to see Freddy holding him up with one big paw. Max didn't dare breathe as Freddy servos word, like the bear was thinking. Then slowly, there was a soft crunching sound of fabric material as he lifted Andy down to his bewildered father. Freddy stood back and resumed his show as if nothing had happened. Max held his face in relief. "Oh, my God," he stuttered. William beamed in pride. "Danger sensors sure come in handy, eh, Max?" he chuckled. Henry ran over, patting Afton's back. "Thank you," he whispered. Max turned his attention back on Freddy. The animatronic glanced at him before shifting his eyes to the backstage area. Max followed his gaze. Unnoticed, Vicky was peeping out the doorway. Her tail flickered back and forth, almost in a predatory way as she stared about the room. Her eyes met Freddy's. He gave her a subtle little nod, motioning her to come on stage. She obeyed, and the two animatronics looked at each other for a while before Vicky started her routine. It wasn't unusual for the robots to act like this, since Max thought from time to time it was a minor malfunction or bug. The thing was, Freddy never really paid so much attention to anything or anyone. The engineer saw some change in behavior every time the bear looked at Vicky. Did he sense something people couldn't? "Why, you think they love each other or something?" Henry laughed, patting Max's back. Afton looked down, slowly saying, "Well, there is a backup programming, but it's dormant right now. I didn't think she'd be so popular on day one, so I fixed her up for Sigmund's nightclub." Henry looked at him at first, then growled between clenched teeth, "Are you sure it's dormant?" Will nodded. "Yes, sir." Turning to Max, Henry said, "Well, nobody applied for night guard all day. I don't know what I'm going to do." Max pondered for a bit before replying, "I'll do it. Larry isn't coming back, so maybe I can help." Henry asked, "Are you sure?" Max said he was positive. Henry cleared his throat. "Okay then, but don't forget to lock up before you go home." The engineer smiled. "Yes, sir."